The Chad Billings Game, Part 2. About the author. Dylan Herbert is the author of various books, which are all stories based on true experiences he has had during his lifetime, or stories from people he has encountered. These books are exaggerated to create a universe of horror, drama, and suspense. Dylan began writing in 2022 and has 6 books released so far. These titles include the following: Jingleman Volume 1, The Wayward Lady, Dearly Beloved, Volume 1, Sergio, Even Lilies Weep, The Vent People, Mr. Goosehead, and The Chad Billings Game, Part 1. This is his 7th book. A boy has been thrust into the world of madness. Will he be able to find the actual city of Jericho and escape the Chad Billings Games? His name is Number 14, and how will he escape this death trap? Time is running out. Will he end up a villain or become the hero of mankind? These titles can be found on Wattpad, Goodreads, YouTube, Amazon, Kindle, and more. Chapters are better known as the table of contents and are as follows. About the author. Chapter 1. Recoded. Chapter 2. Gods of Time, Part 1. Chapter 3. Gods of Time, Part 2. Chapter 4. Goodbye, my friend. Chapter 5. Memories of a Forgotten Time. Chapter 6. The Shadow Man. Chapter 7. Godless Country. Chapter 8. The True Son of Madness. Chapter 9. Lady W. Chapter 10. The Lazarus Effect. Chapter 1. Recoded. As I am about to fight number 88, everyone is on the edge of their seats. Time slowed down to an almost dead stop as our battle commenced. Those who held regular classes and roles did not see our fight. However, anomalies, protocols, regents, and assistants all saw my battle with number 88. I created the sun, and I was determined to destroy this bastard once and for all. You may know me as number 14, but soon I would don the infamous title of Babel, the Shadow Man. How did I gain the powers of God? Well, it happened during the voyage to the forgotten lands of King Yapatar Magnus. My mind was deteriorating, and nothing could stop this. The lands of the Forgotten could only be accessed through the power of one who held King Yapatar Magnus's emblem. All anomalies were branded with the king's symbol. My symbol was a black raven, and although I committed grave sins and taboos, I did not account for this power of madness to corrupt my very mind. We came to this land to find a way to defeat that wicked witch who blocked our path to the city of Jericho. Inside these lands were destroyed structures, zombie-like people, death, and darkness. However, in the center of this place lay a castle. In the castle lived the king himself. Only I could enter this place, but we would need to venture up all of the 1,000 steps to reach this place. The stairway was narrow, and on its sides was a substance of pure fire. This fire was made up of 70% hydrogen, 28% helium, 1.5% carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, and 0.5% neon, iron, silicon, magnesium, silver, and magenta particle graphite. This was the chemical makeup of the sun. One's skin would burn, and by the time I made it up to the top, bones and burned flesh were the only things that remained on me. I opened the door finally, and there King Yapatar Magnus stood. He was magnificent, for he stood towering 20 feet tall. He had a red and black cloak about him with a scarlet crown made of thorns and fire. He was the first king of Jericho and told me I had to beat this game. He said this game was binary until now, and that the admins didn't create the current kings, for they were thought to be wiped out during the first waves of the Blight. However, they survived, and they wanted to stop Chad Billings. Yapatar Magnus taught me many things, and he said madness was due to my mind evolving. He spoke of figures that sought to create a drug that could create these powers of the game and make them a reality in the real world. He said we were connected to a computer via a chip. The Chad Billings CZ8 model was soon to be made into a new drug, JN-by-PX3, or Jericho's new Blight Integration Protocol 3, which was the 3rd integration of the drug. The last versions had a 100% death rate. The king said the only way to stop this was if he was fused into my very mind, so we created a pact. My skin and burns were soon healed completely, and my mind was upgraded. I soon knew of how to stop the blights, grade penalties, and even that wicked witch that guarded our path to the checkpoint. It was here that I learned about the real Chad Billings being number 88. I soon met up with the survivors that had come with me to the Forgotten Lands. I promised the King Yapitar Magnus I would restore this land and save us all. Thus, we soon left this place. It was here that Chad Billings and I would be locked in a death match that lasted for 0.92 seconds, but for some of us it felt like a year. As I summoned the sun to destroy this man, he activated the first admin code.
Admin code 5 activated. You cannot beat me, you damn ape. I am God. I am great. I am your demise, you fucking gorilla. A primitive mind cannot beat me.
Number 88 said to me. Just then, the earth began to crack. The sky grew dark and a massive tidal wave was on the horizon. However, the closer this wave came to us, the clearer I saw it. The tidal wave started burning things it touched. This was a liquid wall of something acidic. I then activated Blitzgrave Shield style and created another item, Yapitar's Forbidden Tree. This tree was massive, and within its branches radiated a glowing white light. It bound number 88 to the ground, seeming to impale the bastard. However, admin code 5 would seem to have other attributes other than just the tidal wave. Chapter 2, Gods of Time, Part 1.
My name is number 13, or at least that's what my name was. I was gifted with the power of King Barnabas, the king of the silent wind. I was already decent because I held the class of the Ericon, which were hunter-like classes, who could hit their target from long distances with god-like accuracy. In addition, they could create traps. The battle that took place would last a total of a year, but for all people who didn't have the classes of gods or roles of power, the battle lasted 0.92 seconds. Chad Billings was actually number 88. It broke my heart how my very own comrade was amongst the vilest of men. My heart sank. If number 88 was this monster, what were number 101 and 14? Chad Billings started using admin codes one after another, 1, 3, then 5. There was no stop to this madness, and my once beloved friend, number 14, was on the edge. He could keep up, but each time he used a Blitzgrave-style weapon or the raw power of King Yapitar Magnus's power, a piece of his mind would go along with him. Chad Billings made a mistake, however, for he didn't realize that this game had changed Babel's mind to a point where all this was mere child's play. According to Babel, he was in the 100th iteration of this game. After 100 years, there was nothing that Chad Billings could do to win. However, even though he was strong, he couldn't win alone.
I haven't had this much fun in years. Oh my fucking God. You are truly one of power, and the gods would be happy. Admin code 6. Code of creation, wisdom's edge bark, spear style.
Chad Billings said. Chad soon impaled Babel, and we all thought this would be his end. What the hell was this wisdom's edge bark? Not even the UIO I knew. It was here that I made my stand and used the raw power of Barnabas to cut the wind itself. I sliced through the wind at speeds no human or god could see, ripping off the left arm of Chad. Blood is dripping from the place his arm once was. Instead of screaming in pain, he laughs and laughs. This attack did nothing to stop him, but then Babel began to speak.
Blitzgrave, corruption over data skill. 1. Decaying cells.
A black swarm of what seemed like mosquitoes came flying at Chad and around the severed arm of Chad. Now, Chad would no longer be able to restore his lost limb. Chad tried over and over again, but it was in vain. Panic started welling in his eyes. What would he do? That didn't matter, for she approached us, Kaylee Braxitinvini. She approached on the horizon, so soon we would have to battle two foes at once, or so we thought. Chad was ready to do anything to beat us all, for what he did next was something we were never ready for.
Admin code, body switch skill.
Chad said as he lay seemingly dead on the ground. Had we done it? No, only seconds later we would find out the terror of those who came from this magical place called the Wayward.
Chapter 3, Gods of Time, Part 2.
One could see his body contort and his bones break, crack, snap, break. You could hear him begging for help, but why would we help a monster? For a split second, we had beaten Chad Billings, or so we thought. However, seeing Babel's corruption over data skill sent shivers down our backs. What kind of sorcery was this? I had never been on the edge more in my life. What would happen next was insane. Calling it insane was an understatement, and we would all have to band together soon. We could tell Babel was getting weaker, for he had expended so much energy until now. However, soon, a beast would march through the horizon on a white stallion. This stallion had bright white wings, and its rider was a beautiful-looking lady, but she was more of a monster. Chad Billings had transferred himself into this lady, and now he held all the skills of the Wayward. This warrior's name was none other than Kali Braxtinvini, a true monster. My name is number 2, and this is the account of the gods of time through my eyes. She came running at us, and swiftly took out those frozen in time. 1, 2, 3, and soon they lay there dead. Babel was weak. Number 13 had used up her energy because she used the raw power of King Nita Barnabas. Using the power of a king drained one's energy. So now it was up to number 101, the most ruthless out of the god classes. He lived for violence, pain, and dominance. Number 101 soon would use the raw power of the elements. From King Forgeron, the king of the elements. King Forgeron was massive, and his wingspan was 27 feet wide. On his back he had massive blue wings, which one could see the cold, icy particles emitting from its tips, with fire and electricity circulating around them. King Forgeron was fast, nimble, powerful, and destructive. He called on all elements to aid him, essentially a jack of all trades but master of none. Fire, water, ice, electricity, wind, light, and darkness. Number 101 was of the Pith-Lusier class, which was considered the class of creation. Anything that number 101 would create, he could imbue with an element or all elements. This would be the greatest sacrifice thus far. I saw the warrior of the Wayward coming towards us. She galloped on a steed that emitted dominance, but my dominance was far more significant. She had lush white hair, her eyes a piercing gray. She had ragged cloaks about her, and a great sword called Hithalon Pius, according to the UIOI, or User Interface of Information. It spoke about how she used a weapon known as an artifact, known to be indestructible by mortals. She would cause earthquakes with each step she took, and then she finally spoke.
Mortal child, my name is Kali Braxtinvini. I come from a place of the Wayward. My hatred for all humans stems from a man called Sergio Webster, a true monster, and the only man who killed me, my brothers and my sisters. The only man who sent my mother into a battle of darkness. I controlled the Von Empire, and life was fantastic, but now I only have shame and the embarrassment of defeat. Even now, my mind is being taken over by someone. I fear I will succumb to this infiltration of madness. However, since you are immortal, I will be glad to provide you with a long, agonizing death. Prepare yourself.
Kali Braxtinvini, the daughter of the Wayward Lady, said. Number 101 lived for fighting, so he created a scythe-like weapon imbued with every single element. Each swing would pierce the sky itself and leave a crater with each sound. Boom, boom, boom. A deafening sound of God's screaming could be heard. The air was so cold that it burned the skin. Flames ignited the very structure of the flesh and would easily peel the skin like paper to the shredder. The electricity that would shock the air itself, making crackling sounds. Even Zeus would fear this power. Water with so much pressure it could rip through fire with ease. Number 101 was a monster. Not just any monster, but we would soon know the truth of this sadistic bastard. Kali Braxtinvini and Number 101 both began fighting. Weapons clashed, and the world seemed to stand still. Number 101 split opened Kali Braxtinvini's stallion. A once beautiful specimen was now stained red, with its organs hanging out. However, this new Kali Braxtinvini had an ace up her sleeve. Using the admin codes and her natural powers, she cut off Number 101's leg. It was here everyone would fear this madman.
Bow down before my greatness, you whelp. You are an insignificant nobody. I am your god.
Kali Braxtinvini said. Until now, the Pith-Lusier class was only known for creating items, and the items that were created would shift the battle.
Class of creation skill, identification of god classes skill, gas fumes.
A seemingly dying Number 101 said when he said this, those who held god classes of anomalies and regents. Our minds were open briefly to who we were briefly before this game. This was all we needed to stop this Chad Billings. Whether this was actually Chad Billings or merely an avatar, we would soon stop this bastard.
Chapter 4. Goodbye, my friend.
The craziest part of this game was that we knew people spoke different languages, but we understood it all. We were a people all united, without the barrier of language. We did not know our exact age, but somehow, we knew we were all kids. Kids foresaid to endure hardships of adults, and adults foresaid into an epic cosmic experiment. In the hands of Chad Billings, we were all chess pieces in this sick game of his. We had no memory of life before this game, but we knew how to talk, walk, basic concepts of math, and much more. This game was the worst, for we were all brainwashed. However, I was gifted by the very gods themselves. This would lead us down a path where the Pith-Lusier class would be hunted down. My name is number 101, and we did beat Chad Billings briefly, but what did it cost? It cost friendships, for even though I was obsessed with power, my loyalty never faltered. However, in the end, my old friend Bobble would choose love over me, and that would be the genesis of my hatred for my once beloved friends. Kali Braxatinvini came at all of us with a vengeance, and only death lurked in the corners of this planet. With my dying breath, I used the skill that all Pith-Lusier classes held, but the sacrifice was death itself. This skill was called Class of Creation Skill, Identification of God Class's Skill, Gas Fumes. This skill opened the minds of all allies in the party. All brainwashing skills would now be void, and all thought I died. However, King Faugeron demanded power and a host. Thus, I would be reborn into this godless country. I would don a new personality. My name was Fégenta Faugeron. However, before this, Babel would witness only grief, pain, and the loss of yet another beloved comrade.
I was weak and at my end, or so I thought. My mind was limitless and unstoppable, for who could stop limitless thought? Even with my intellect, my body was at its limits until number 101 sacrificed himself to save us all. A suicidal skill that all Pith-Lusiers held. It restored all ailments, debuffs, and stats, and opened the minds of those who were in a group with that said class. My mind was opened, and it was the most painful experience I had ever felt. All my memories came flooding in. Memories from fighting alongside my comrades, first arriving at that camp of the thief in number 47. Memories of meeting the 4 kings of Jericho. I remember the first king of Jericho, Yapatar Magnus, the king of the Forgotten Lands. He was grand and stood towering above all humans and even nature itself. King Yapatar Magnus stood 20 feet tall. He had a black cloak ignited by fire and a scarlet crown made of thorns. Those who wore King Yapatar's crown were driven mad, but gained the intellectual capacity of limitless thought. The UIOI, or User Interface of Information, had nothing on this king. I remember the second king of Jericho, Nitobarnabas, the king of the Silent Wind, the younger brother of Yapatar Magnus. Nitobarnabas controlled the element of wind, far greater and more robust than the third king's element of wind. Nitobarnabas stood 18 feet tall, a giant like the first king of Jericho. He controlled 2 fox spirits who controlled the wind itself. The 2 foxes were Nito and Barnabas. Together, the 3 of them were known as Nitobarnabas Magnus. He wore a green and black cloak and an emerald crown of thorns. I remember the third king of Jericho, Faugeron, the king of the elements, the only cousin to King Nitobarnabas Magnus. He controlled all elements and demanded dominance of all who stood before him. The only appropriate posture before this king was bowing. Fire, water, ice, wind, electricity, light, and darkness were all under his control. He stood 16 feet tall, and all his enemies feared him. Those whom the kings of Jericho blessed would adopt their personalities as well. King Faugeron had wings of terror. Wings as blue as the sky, as beautiful as the ocean. Wings that would make any mortal bow down in awe. He had a wingspan of 27 feet wide, and on his wings, you could see ice coming off his wings. His wings had icy particles emitting from their tips, with fire and electricity raging around them. King Faugeron was fast, but not as fast as King Nitobarnabas Magnus. He was powerful and destructive, very prone to anger. I remember the 4th king of Jericho, Hagaropius, the king of mischief. He was a friend of King Nitobarnabas and is known for his skill of illusions, deceitfulness, and trickery. Everything was a game. He and King Yapatar Magnus often fought amongst each other. It was like an unending cycle of fighting. King Hageropius stood 11 feet tall but would be the cause of all hacking classes, a way to tip the balance of the game. To Hageropius, all this was a game. He had a violet crown made of thorns, with a white and gold cloak about him. I remember meeting all of my group for the first time. When we woke up, I remember meeting number 13, 88, and 101. It felt like forever ago back when I was number 14. I remember every iteration of this game. My memory even went back to before the first iteration. This memory would hold the key to who or what we all were. Chapter 5. Memories of a Forgotten Time. They are all ready to prep, sir. All 112 kids are ready. The 3 special kids are in the blue box. An unfamiliar voice says to a man in a suit.
Oh my, I can't wait to devour these kids for 101 years. The things I will do, ripping them from their families and selling this machine to our buyer, this will be magnificent.
A somewhat familiar voice says, Mr. Billings, 2 specimens are still awake and are not being affected by the sleeping agent. A doctor explains to Chad Billings. However, Chad Billings did not care as he approached 2 young kids named Kenzie Lovendian and Julius Redcraft. He hit them over the head with a baseball bat. The kids could be seen crying and holding hands before falling asleep and entering the Chad Billings game. My memory is somewhat foggy, but I remembered exactly who Chad fucking Billings was. He was working with an underground organization called Dandelion, a group founded by 3 people. The 2 people known to have started this group were Kyle Dillinger and Michael Bruce Morden, a group that stole, trafficked, and killed children. They would take them in the disguise of being part of a boarding school somewhere in the United States of America. However, this would be the group's last mistake. All that was known was that a woman of unknown origin led this Dandelion group, which was apparently based in Arizona. The only person I knew for a fact who had ties with this group was the police officer who kidnapped us and gave us over to Chad Billings. The officer's name was Jerry Odesky. I'm unsure if we have participated in this game for a week or years, for we would all be hooked up to a machine and drift away. However, the stress from this game had real-life consequences, for some of the kids would die from the stress of it all. When I experienced this all, I knew what I had to do. My memories returned to me, and I was back in the real world for 10 seconds. I was Julius Redcraft, the 302nd witch of my bloodline. Contrary to urban myths, witches were a bloodline and not gender-specific. I remembered what my mother and grandfather taught me. I was one of the last witches alive in this generation. So, I started a blood clot in the very brain of Chad Billings. It would be slow acting, but I knew with magic I would beat this son of a bitch. You may not know me yet, but I was the great-grandfather of Vivi Redcraft, and all people around the world would fear our last name, and our name would hold fear even on the planet of Glimmer Prime. 10 seconds later, I was back at the Chad Billings game. I'm not sure if the others I was fighting alongside of had a rush of memories as I did, but now this game seemed like child's play. My skills of the real world and the skills I had gained from all my 100th iterations of this game were under my control. Soon we would escape the blue box.
He was a kind soul when we first met, and even though I did not know him for a long time, I could tell he wanted to survive and save people from their fate. However, little did he know that even with his great powers, true human evolution was far from his grasp. He was donned different titles: Babel, the Shadow Man, King Yapatar's Avatar, and even number 14. However, true raw intellectual prowess is something one is born with, not the result of the same game on repeat. I have seen the gods of this universe come and go, but I am almost ready to show the world something great. However, that will have to wait till later. I see a mass of remaining people frozen. Those who did not hold good classes or roles of power served no purpose. This place was rotten, but soon things would wind up. However, from the holy lands of Ohio to the horrors of Arizona, to the sick-infested lands of Virginia, not even I could fathom what would take place, for death was coming, and it needed a sacrifice. You are probably wondering who the hell I am. Well, you will soon find out.
Chapter 6. The Shadow Man.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Kali Braxton Vini said as she was filled with ripped flesh and blood. Her skin was ripped like a peeled fruit, exposing her muscles and bloody flesh. Number 14, known as Babel, begged and begged, but it was far too late, for before Kali would leave this world, she would slit the throat of number 13. The world was in slow motion, it seemed, and you could hear the droplets of sweat and fear touch the ground. As it did, a splash sound could be heard echoing throughout the world. Somehow, this great warrior, king, and god, Babel, was too slow. He hadn't foreseen Kali Braxton Vini to make this last desperate move. However, why was number 13 even here? Let me tell you of a tale of passion, love, and forgiveness. This was the account of how Babel, who was once called number 14, fell from grace and became a tyrant god of the false world. The false world was this game. Babel would soon be called the Shadow Man, a far more insidious beast, and the only person who could save him was himself. Those who witnessed the birth and resurrection of this poor soul, called number 14, were of the following: Numbers 2, 13, 47, 101, and 112. My name is number 2, and what happened when our minds were opened? Well, we remembered what happened up to the very first iteration of this game. However, what we remembered was nothing compared to the stress and agony of what number 14 remembered. He was screaming and screaming. Blood was shooting out the pores of his body. He was foaming out the mouth, and these memories were driving him mad, for the flood of memories came instantly. It was here that Kali Braxton Vini would die. He instantly used what seemed to be telekinesis and forced Kali Braxton Vini to come to him. He then set her on fire. He created a metal-like rod with a spike at the end to impale her. Not once, but 56 times. He set her on fire multiple times over and over. You could smell her very flesh burning like a pot of stew. That foul stench of dead skin was about in the air. How was he doing this without casting a skill? There was no cooldown time. Kali Braxton Vini begged and begged when she realized none of her skills were working, and she was really dying. Number 14 seemed even angrier than usual, like he had witnessed something. A dying Kali finally speaks.
It seems you have won our little game. However, there are 2 buyers who want this machine of gods. I will bring the powers of this game into real life, and you won't be able to stop me. There are people like me who will do the same thing to other children, and you can't stop this. You thought you were so smart, but the smartest man in the universe is one of the buyers. When you hear of his name, he will send you into madness. His name is...
A sound of distorted binary data numbers crunching could be heard. Then a sound of laughter could be heard from Chad Billings, who was controlling the body of Kali Braxton Vini. All of a sudden, Kali Braxton Vini swings her blade at us and chops the wind, breaking down whatever it touched. However, in the direction she swung, it hit number 13, and she soon lay on the ground, bleeding and dying. Kali Braxton Vini soon fell to the ground laughing. Number 13's eyes locked with Babel's, and it was here no words were uttered, but an internal conversation could be felt in our hearts, for we were bonded together through hardships, war, and love. Number 13 soon spoke to her beloved friend, Babel.
Hi, my sweet and beautiful friend. I remember first meeting you, number 14. It was awesome before we ventured out into this mad world. So many times I thought we would perish, but you led us to victory time and time again. I cherished any time I could get with you, and I would have traveled to Jericho with you. I hope you never let that light in your heart fade away. I love you no matter what name you decide to pick for yourself. Whether it's number 14, Babel, the Shadow Man, or your real name, Julie's Redcraft, I will always be by your side.
As she said this, tears could be seen on Babel. Babel lost 2 friends that day. He held her in his arms and she vanished into the air. For those who died, her would become part of the data structure of this game. This was enough to drive any man mad. Babel was driven into madness, and the once calculated man was driven to chaos, based on the darkest emotions of his soul. He walked to a dying Kali and ripped her limbs off with his 4th Blitzgrave weapon. He created Blitzgrave, Jericho's sword. This weapon looked like a regular sword but could manipulate the mass of itself. It caused earthquakes with each swing, and soon there was a hole in the ground where Kali used to be. However, we would all soon march to freedom. Those who survived were few, but soon we would go to our new place. However, the story told to those whose normal classes would taint our group forever, and Babel. The Shadow Man would have no choice but to become a tyrant god, For even though he saved us all, some people were never satisfied.
Chapter 7. Godless Country.
He created a portal, and they walked through it. They had witnessed a cosmic event, but still had no idea of how to get out of this game. Babel thought he was a genius, but I have seen genius, and being forced into a game 100 times and finally winning was just common sense to me. But even though I have to admit he had resiliency, but not even that was enough for what happened. Numbers 2, 6, 7, 9, 47, 49, 55, 68, 69, 70, 99, 100, and me. Number 112 survived. Only 13 survived out of the entire group of 112 kids that started playing this game. Normal and God classes alike met their end here. However, numbers 6, 7, 9, 68, and 69 were not even happy. They claimed this all happened to them because number 101 was obsessed with power. They would not go with us until all those who held the Pithlusier class were banished, for all of them were mad, and we had to be safe. So, on this day, Babel banned the class Pithlusier in their society. How weak this boy was, catering to the masses. However, I, number 112, would get us out of this world. I had to see what this game had to offer. Soon, Babel created a new society after seeing that the city of Jericho was just ruins and rubble. This was shocking, but seeing him create an entirely new city was amazing. If this power was to be in the real world, I could accomplish anything and destroy that organization called Dandelions, and finally, the woman who went by Lady W would be destroyed. I had my suspicions about who she really was, but I needed proof. Soon, a magnificent place called the Even Lucre Capital was born, and in its walls was everything people dreamed of. However, each day sanity was stripped from Babel's mind. He would slaughter and slaughter, beasts of the games and people of other groups. For somehow, even after Chad Billings was dead, the games still were going on. However, after 15 weeks, I decided to approach this weary soul. You see, Babel was not only killing his victims, but consuming their very flesh, their organs, drinking their blood, and this taboo would catch up to him. Those who forced him to banish the Pithlusier class soon came to fear him. Reasoning with this beast was impossible, and even the words of number 2 fell on deaf ears. Babel may have been a god of this universe, and even held the blood of witches, but I was a monster, and the god of all humans. I punched Babel in the head repeatedly. His child's toys, known as Blitzgrave weapons, had no effect on me. I wanted to see if his weapons could stand up against me. I had always wanted to fight, for I had been stuck here for 10 iterations of this game and was so bored. Could Babel, the Shadow Man, beat me? For I had tricks up my sleeve.
Chapter 8. The True Son of Madness.
After he used his Blitzgrave weapons on me, I realized his true powers. The more Babel fought, the stronger he got. He was a demon, a god amongst mortals. However, how would he fare against me? I grew tall, my bones broke and shattered as I grew bone wings out my very back. I grew disgusting, rotten flesh, and my nails were now claws of death. This was the curse of all who held the bloodline of Webster. I had evolved ever since slaughtering those bastards in the Wayward. My true name is Sergio Webster, and this was merely an experiment. Soon Babel became so strong after countless days of us fighting, neither side took a break. I was ecstatic, for I had not had this much fun in years. However, my last experiment would prove useful, for I would resurrect number 13. If my plan was to work in the future, I would need both Julius Redcraft and Kenzie Lavendian alive. The Lavendians would soon be the catalyst of my rebirth. I knew I would do one day. However, that would be a story for another time. Blood was gushing out the wounds of both of our bodies, but at last I resurrected number 13. Then, when I did this, Babel stopped. He froze in his tracks and started crying. He asked if that was really her. I told him yes. I said I would let them out this game if they promised to protect my offspring no matter what. They needed to pledge a lifetime loyalty to me, and only me. They were to spend every waking moment making sure my offspring were safe against the very group who kidnapped them. That was my only demand. However, in order to get out of this game, I required one thing from them, a sample of their blood. So thus they all agreed. The two were united, and I promised the Tutlake would make it out of this game. I was very calculating. I knew kids were thrown into this game. However, they said nothing about the other numbers who were stuck in this game. I guess they assumed I was just the hero of this story. So after gaining their blood, I would create a device that forced sharp pains in their skulls, and they would have flashbacks of the worst days inside this game. This was just in case they had second thoughts. So at last, yes, the Evan Luker capsule did exist. However, its length was short-lived. They did modify the Chad Billings model CZ8 chip, but that did not matter. I had been pulling the strings of long ago, and now my mission was complete. My name is Sergio Webster, and this was the tale of the madness, passion, war, and love. Until we meet again.
Chapter 9. Lady W.
Lady W, that man got to the machine first. What should we do?
An unknown man says to a beautiful woman who is sitting down. She just smiled and told the man he had no means to open the machine without the DNA of Chad Billings, who was in her possession. She felt in her soul that there would be a fight before the night was over. The man was panicking, for he had failed the task that Lady W had given him. She told him it was okay, and held the man in her arms with her breasts touching his face. This felt like the relationship between a loving wife and husband. However, when his guard was lowered, she quickly broke his arm. One could hear screams in the room and knew he had failed the beautiful Lady W. She demanded all tasks to be completed to perfection. Who was this lady? Well, that is a story for another time. However, let me tell you of what happened to the two children who had entered this game as numbers 13 and 14, Julius Redcraft and Kenzie Lovendian. Well, they did not agree at first, but I promised to defeat this man called Chad Billings. However, I did not calculate killing him would have dire consequences. The internet praised evil men years later, after the death of countless vile demons of the organization called Dandelions. This very group influenced the man not altered by me or the wayward. So thus, in the 21st century, a man called Mr. Goosehead would be born. This man murdered just about as many people as me, Sergio Webster, and my friend Bruce Odesky combined. You see, there were more powers against each other. It wasn't just those who followed me and those who followed Lady W. The world was advancing, and stories of our great battles and powers were now thought to be only stories. Parents told their kids to keep them in line. However, this Chad Billings game created a black hole, and soon, the entire United States of America would fall victim to the darkness that I had created when I tainted the wayward. Until we meet again. Chapter 10. The Lazarus Effect.
Body switch skill activated. Loading protocol tainted grail. Do you wish to wake up, Master?
A strange computer voice said to me. I tell the voice yes, for I had to stop Chad Billings. However, who was I? Everything was a blur, but when I woke up, I saw a sign that read, "Welcome to Donaldsonville, Louisiana." Where was I? Where were my comrades? Had we won against Chad Billings? However, a voice spoke to me, and it demanded people to submit to my dominance. I reached into my back pocket and felt something there. It was a card of some sort, and it had a picture ID that read, Sean LeVar. Who was this Sean LeVar? Just then, I get a call from a device, very similar to the guide of the Chad Billings game. Somehow, I knew how to use it.
Babe, where are you? I have been trying to reach you for 2 weeks.
I was confused about who this was, but I'm guessing it was someone important to me before I was captured. My head was still throbbing with intense pain. I told the strange woman that I didn't know who she was or who I was. I told her I was in some place called Donaldsonville, Louisiana. She was surprised and told me to hang tight, and she arrived 6 hours later. Her name was Christy LeVar, and this town held secrets not even the Chad Billings games could stop. However, as time passed, the more I remembered. I remember the vent people of Smithfield, Virginia. I remember fighting against the Ohio man. I thought only kids were in the Chad Billings game. This road would get even more strange with time. This era of time was before Detective Robbie Wayne Clark and I were mortal enemies. He often told me he looked up to me as a child. However, That's a story for another time. One might wonder why Sergio's and Sean Lavar's voices differed inside the Chad Billings game. Well, the stronger one got, the more it changed based on classes and roles. Those two were the only people to play the Chad Billings game who weren't children. You probably still have so many questions about the Chad Billings game, but I regret to say that the next time someone would hear the name Chad Billings was when the actual Chad Billings was facing off against Mr. Goosehead. Time was different in the Chad Billings game, and for everyone, the perception of time was different. For some, one iteration was 1 year, for some it was just weeks, and for some only hours. What was the blue box? Only the gods knew. Until we meet again. My name is number 101, Fegenta Fogeron, the avatar of King Fogeron, and now Sean Lavar. Soon, the world would bend to my will, starting with this woman who had called me.